Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy to understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, welcome back to another episode. Bobby, it is great to be here with you. And today we have a topic that I think everyone can relate to. Today, we're going to be talking about divorce in your inner circle, your friends, your family, and setting some boundaries. Once you kind of let everybody know and the cat gets out of the bag that you're going through a divorce, a lot of times people have opinions. Friends and family start to kind of tell you things that maybe you weren't expecting them to talk about. People might be telling you stories of what happened to them or what happened to a coworker. You may even hear from somebody that you haven't heard from in a long time that just wants to talk about their divorce with you. And sometimes it can be helpful, but there are a lot of times that it can be honestly kind of stressful and emotionally draining. And so today we really want to kind of talk through what do we want that process to look like? Who are we letting in? Who are we kind of trying to set some boundaries around? Because really, this divorce is your divorce at the end of the day. And we have to be careful of like who we're going to let in this process. And Bobby, I want to talk about first, I'm sure you have experienced this. When you say you're going to go through a divorce, all of a sudden, everyone becomes an expert. Have you experienced this? It's like everybody has something to say.
Absolutely, Greer. It's good to see you and to talk about this one because this is one as an attorney, and you might be, listening to this and going, well, why does Bobby have something to say about this? Or why is he an expert in this? And I can tell you that your sphere of influence, the community that's around you and what they're telling you about divorce and what to do and not to do has a ton of impact on what this process is going to look like. And we certainly experience it from the attorney side. We see it. We see some clients that are steadfast in their beliefs and what they're going to do, and they're kind of unaffected by the people around them. And we see other people that are like a candle in the wind and they're going whichever way the wind is blowing. And so it's really important to talk about this and to recognize that those quote unquote experts have a lot of impact on us. I think that, we all turn into experts when we hear about something like this because we do have opinions that are so strong. And we feel like divorce is one of those things that in relationships that everyone can kind of just pontificate on. And we all feel like we have something to offer as far as our own experience or what we think that person should do. Or maybe we've been looking at this couple for years thinking, oh man, they need to get a divorce. And so now we feel like now's the opportunity that we can actually share our 2 cents, welcome or not. So a divorce is kind of just, it's one of those things that people like to gossip about, for better or worse, and talk about. So you're going to hear about it when you're going through your own divorce. It's going to come back to you. So you got to protect yourself and really think through what that means.
Yeah. And, you just said to protect yourself. And it makes me think that I do feel like most of the time people are trying to be protective, right? They're trying to be helpful. They're trying to be protective because they love you. They know that you're going through a difficult time. And so I would assume that most of the time, these people in your inner circle, they mean well by
Yeah.
all of their advice and how they're trying to be there for you. But sometimes, just because it's meant well doesn't mean it's actually going to be beneficial for you. So, why don't we kind of talk through a little bit of like, what does it kind of look like when someone's being protective and, what are the things that are maybe, fine, not a big deal, but maybe what might also be some signs of like, oh, maybe this might be a place to create a boundary because this might make it more expensive or this may not be legally correct or some of these other
Yeah.
pitfalls.
Yeah. I mean, let's just say your best friend has just been cheated on or the cheating has been revealed and now the divorce is happening and you're telling your best friend to take him for everything that he's worth and to take him to the cleaners and really firing you up over this whole situation and not letting you compartmentalize things and encouraging you to be extremely litigious in the situation and to use court as a tool of revenge. I mean, that's a really dangerous place to be in. And there's probably something really satisfying about it. You know, your friend's trying to help, your friend's angry, is trying to be angry for you, but strategically and legally speaking, that can be a very costly mistake to take that sort of position.
Yeah, you mentioned a friend might say, take them for everything that they're worth, or maybe they might give you the advice to, don't move out no matter what, or hey, you should get full custody of the kids. But I would assume from the attorney perspective, there are certain things that you need to be considering, and this friend may not know about those things. So, what are some of those aspects that no matter what somebody is telling you, that when you're going through to the divorce, you kind of want them to go through that filter because they don't know your specific situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is reminding me of a really common one where a divorce will be going on, and maybe it is a little bit more complicated. And divorce can be pretty nuanced as far as what can cause it to be held up in a more complex case than a simpler case. And your friend will say, your divorce really shouldn't be taking this long, or your attorney is way overcharging you because your case is just really simple. It's exactly like mine. And
Mm.
the truth of it is no divorces are exactly the same, because divorce and the process is really a product of the two individuals, the two very unique individuals and their very unique relationship. So just because your friend's divorce went smoothly or quickly doesn't mean that yours should too, just because you both have a house and two children, or whatever the similarity is between you two.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because I think as a divorced person myself, I've been divorced a really long time now. But when I first was divorced, I think, I sort of fell into some of those pitfalls. And you would like have a friend who was going through a divorce and you would think, oh, well, it's going to go this way, or, you should consider that. But as you get farther along in the process and more people have gone through a divorce that it's just like you said, every situation is so different, mainly because the people are
Mhm.
so different. And their circumstances seem to never really be the same. So, as I've been divorced longer, I tend to give like less kind of advice. And I'm more just like, well, whatever you think is best or whatever your attorney says, because really you don't know. And every single case truly is just so different.
Mhm.
And I think it's great to, to remember that because you don't want to start kind of creating these fights that are gonna make it more expensive or take longer,
Right.
and sometimes, unfortunately, our friends and family can kind of send us down that wrong road, and,
Right.
really, some of this support can almost turn into, like, a self-sabotage, and I don't know, I'm sure you've seen that,
Mhm.
where, like you're saying, you have a friend that's well-meaning, but because of maybe something they've had you do, it ends up, taking a lot longer.
Yeah,
Um
absolutely. And what that well-meaning friend can do is sow seeds of distrust in you, with between you and your lawyer. And don't get me wrong, don't there is plenty of lawyers that need to be questioned, and we shouldn't just take a lawyer's word for it. But at the same time, you have to have your own relationship with your lawyer. You have to decide whether or not your lawyer is trustworthy. And I truly believe that most of us are, and that we are really trying to get our client through that situation as smoothly and cleanly as possible. But here's the secret: we don't know as lawyers. For other people, the other people will chime in and have an opinion about how your divorce should go or could go, when in fact the lawyers who have done this 1,000 plus times, we don't know how it's going to go. It's weird. There's this dichotomy. On one hand, we're pretty good, and I've talked about this before, at predicting where the final settlement is going to land, like who's going to get what and what the schedule is probably ultimately going to be. Within the first month or so of a case, I think most lawyers can say this case is probably going to land in this general area. But on the other hand, we're not so good at predicting, is it going to take a month or is it going to take 12 months, because we don't know the individuals involved. So we have to take a step back and just go with the flow and see how things are going to evolve throughout the case.
Yeah. And, we've been talking a lot about, friends and family and their advice and kind of how to receive that. But then, right now, obviously in our world, social media is such a big thing. And as an attorney, a friend and family might be more of a confidant, someone who's closer to you. But what is your general advice about someone going through a divorce and how to handle that divorce when it comes to social media? Because that's a whole new thing that I'm sure has like blown up over the last few years for some of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the general advice is to stay off social media as much as you can. And, well, obviously, posting about your own divorce can be problematic because, like they say in the TVs and the movies, anything you say can and will be used against you. So if you put it in, a recording, then there's no denying that you said it or did it or whatever the case may be. So posting
Mhm.
on social media can be a problem. One, for creating incriminating evidence against yourself. Two, poking the bear and making things worse as far as your relationship with your spouse. And then I think there's a third element of let's be really careful about just mindlessly consuming social media regarding the divorce and the divorce process, because social media can be pretty toxic. And I think we're all aware of that side of social media that can, really influence our thinking. And, the stuff that goes viral on social media is the stuff that usually speaks to our more base instincts: anger, jealousy, revenge. That stuff is really interesting to watch, but don't let it influence you. Don't sway from being kind of a rock in your divorce process and going slow and steady through it.
Yeah. I mean, bringing up you kind of mentioned like those evidence based problems and like social media being one of those because you've got that video or maybe you've sent a nasty text message and that type of thing. And just how important it is to, make sure that you're not kind of giving your ex spouse these things that they can take to court and use kind of against you in a way. And I've got a good example here that I think is, so we've got our friend Mark, and Mark is unfortunately, he's going through a divorce and he's sitting around with his friends, probably drinking a beer, and he's venting about his divorce, right? And one of his friends encourages him. He's like, send her a long text message and tell her
Mhm.
about, what a terrible, wife she's been and a terrible parent. And we can list all of these things, and everybody's brainstorming, around, talking about it. And so, Mark is like, yeah. And he writes up this text message. He's got his liquid courage going and boom, he sends this text message to his ex-spouse. And all of a sudden, this becomes evidence in a
Mhm.
case that a judge is looking at. And he's in a courtroom completely sober. Now, looking back at this text message that his friends, while he was drinking a couple beers, made him write. And he's going, oh no, I really
Yeah, I mean,
shouldn't.
you never know what's gonna happen in a case, and hopefully this text message doesn't end up in court. And people send these text messages all of the time, and they don't end up in court. In fact, people bring us these text messages, and they think that it's gonna be some sort of silver bullet, but we try to dissuade them against using that text message, dissuade them from pushing the case to that place. But
Hmm.
if it is pushed to that place, maybe something happens where Mark's drinking is a little bit more than just a couple drinks. And his spouse says, "You know what? I'm not comfortable actually with the child with him." And then she files a motion to prohibit him from seeing the child. And she attaches that text message because maybe there's a lot of misspellings in that text message because
Hmm.
of his anger, because of his drinking. It's clear that when he wrote it, he was a little bit inebriated. Like, that is really problematic. So, there's a lot of things that can be extracted from especially long text messages. Like, we want to keep there's some really good rules of thumb about communicating in a divorce, communicating in writing, and keeping it brief and on point is one of them. When we text, we really want to just keep it very brief, simple, responding to the question. It's the same thing when we're testifying in court. The worst witnesses are the ones that the other side asks them a very simple question, and then they go on this long rant about things that are totally unrelated, and it doesn't help their case. It hurts it more than anything.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I wanted to mention too, so we're saying like text message, we mentioned video, but there's a lot of ways to communicate today. And I'm assuming that any of those ways that you could communicate, whether it is video or not just like a general text message, but even like there's apps now that you can message through, or
Mhm.
there's social media that you can message through. Would you say that all of those things are open to potentially being brought to court?
Absolutely. Anything that's in writing, anything that's recorded, saved on a computer, on a phone, could be brought into your case. Again, hopefully you don't get to that place, because usually that means the divorce has gone really sideways. But we got to be careful in how we communicate. I mean, the more that we're putting stuff out there, the higher chance there is that
Mhm.
your divorce is going to go sideways. And I think that that brings us back to really the theme of this episode, which is about your community and who you're communicating with. And it's not just about making a text message or putting a post out there. If you're talking to everybody in your circle about your divorce and the ways that you've been wronged, and you really don't have any boundaries about your emotions or the information that you're sharing, there's a good likelihood that one, that can come back around to your ex and they, or your spouse, and they'll start to have feelings about it. Or maybe those things could still be used against you. I mean, just because it's not recorded doesn't mean that it can't be used against you. You could have your neighbor testify against you in court, hypothetically. So being contained and controlled in how we communicate and who we share things with is really important in the divorce process.
Yes, so, so wise. You talk a lot about divorce being private, and this is just such a great example of, being careful of who you're going to share this information with. Well, Bobby, we are out of time for today, but next time that we talk, why don't we talk about the people that you should have in your circle that you should be sharing this information with, so that we can help everybody to maybe find a couple of healthy outlets so that they are able to make sure that they're getting through this process with the help that they need. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well, Bobby, thanks so much for being here with me today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you know someone that you think would enjoy this episode, please go ahead and share it with them. If you have any questions or potential topics you want us to discuss, please let us know, and we'll be back next week for another episode.
Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.